I work for the Pentagon. We received invasion plans from ourselves. They're dated 2029.
The email arrived on a Tuesday morning, buried between spam about mortgage refinancing and a notice from my gym membership. Subject line: urgent, security clearance required. I almost deleted it, assuming it was some phishing scam, but something about the sender's address stopped me. It came from a Pentagon domain, not the kind of thing scammers usually manage to fake convincingly. I clicked it open, half expecting a virus to start eating my hard drive. Instead, I found a terse message from someone named Colonel Rebecca Marsh, requesting my immediate presence at a facility in Alexandria for a matter of national security. The message included a phone number and a reference code. I'd been working as a civilian contractor for the Department of Defense for about 6 years, mostly doing IT security work. Nothing glamorous, just making sure the networks stayed protected from foreign hackers and making sure classified information didn't leak. This was different, though. The tone was urgent, almost panicked, which wasn't something you saw much in government communications. They usually buried urgency under layers of bureaucratic calm. I called the number, half expecting it to ring through to some call center, but it connected after just one ring. A woman's voice answered, clipped and professional. Mitchell? Yes, this is David Mitchell. I got an email. We've been trying to reach you since 0600. How soon can you get to Alexandria? I checked my watch. It was just past 9. I'm in Arlington. I can be there in 40 minutes depending on traffic. 30 minutes, Mr. Mitchell. This is time sensitive. She gave me an address and hung up before I could ask any questions. I grabbed my keys, my laptop bag, and my security badge, then headed out to my car. The address led me to an unmarked building near the Pentagon, one of those anonymous government structures that could have been anything from a records storage facility to a black site. I'd driven past it 1,000 times without giving it a second thought. Security at the entrance was tighter than usual. 2 armed guards checked my ID 3 times, scanned my retinas, and had me empty my pockets completely before letting me through. They confiscated my phone, my smartwatch, even my car keys with their electronic fob. Inside, the building had that distinctive government smell, industrial cleaner mixed with old coffee and the faint ozone scent of too many computers running in too small a space. A young lieutenant met me in the lobby and escorted me down a series of corridors, each requiring a new badge scan, until we reached a conference room deep in the building's interior. Colonel Marsh was waiting inside, along with 4 other people I didn't recognize. She was in her late 40s, with gray streaking through her dark hair and the kind of rigid posture that came from decades of military service. The others included 2 men in suits who had CIA written all over them, a woman in a Navy uniform with more ribbons than I could count, and an older man in civilian clothes who radiated academic authority. Mr. Mitchell, Colonel Marsh said, gesturing to an empty chair, thank you for coming on such short notice. Please sit. Everyone in this room has been cleared for what we're about to show you, and you're about to understand why we needed you here immediately. One of the CIA types, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, placed a thick manila folder on the table in front of me. Before you open that, he said, I need you to understand that what you're about to see is classified at the highest possible level. You will not discuss this with anyone outside this room, including your immediate supervisors, unless explicitly authorized. The penalties for disclosure include criminal prosecution and imprisonment. Do you understand? I swallowed hard and nodded. I understand. Open it, Colonel Marsh said. Inside the folder were photographs, dozens of them, showing what looked like military documents, strategic plans, troop movements, weapon specifications, targeting data. I was about to ask what I was looking at when I noticed the dates. All of the documents were stamped with dates in 2029, 4 years from now. I flipped through more pages, my confusion growing. These are what? Simulations? War game scenarios? I looked up at the assembled group. Their faces were grim. Mr. Mitchell, the woman in the Navy uniform, said, her name tag reading Admiral Chen. Those documents arrived at the Pentagon 3 days ago via secure military channels. They purport to be actual operational plans for a coordinated military action against the United States, scheduled to begin in 2029. The originating source codes identify them as coming from our own strategic command systems. We received invasion plans from ourselves, Colonel Marsh said flatly. Detailed, comprehensive plans for a multi-front assault on American territory, complete with troop deployments, weapons allocations, and tactical objectives. According to these documents, in 4 years the United States military will invade the United States. That's impossible, I said, stating the obvious. The academic-looking man leaned forward. His voice carried a slight accent, German maybe. I'm Dr. Werner Haas, formerly with DARPA, now consulting on temporal mechanics research. Nothing about this situation follows conventional possibility, Mr. Mitchell. That's precisely why you're here. Your background includes not just IT security, but also advanced physics and mathematics. We need someone who can think outside normal parameters. I set down the folder, my mind racing. You're saying these are real documents from the future. Somebody is messing with you. This is an elaborate hack or a psychological operation. We considered that, one of the CIA agents said. His badge identified him as Frank Cordova. We've subjected these documents to every analysis we can think of. The encryption keys are genuine, using protocols that won't be implemented until next year, according to our current development timeline. The digital signatures validate against systems that don't exist yet. Even the metadata contains information about hardware that's still in prototype phase. We pulled the documents from a secure server that requires biometric authorization from at least 6 different high-ranking officials simultaneously. There's no evidence of intrusion, no signs of tampering. They simply appeared in the system 3 days ago, as if they'd been there all along, even though our logs show the directory was empty 12 hours prior. And the content? I asked. What do these plans actually describe? Colonel Marsh opened another folder and spread several large maps across the table. They showed the United States divided into sectors, with arrows indicating invasion routes and strategic positions marked. The plans describe a coordinated assault beginning on March 15th, 2029, she said. Multiple entry points along both coasts, with secondary forces moving through the Canadian and Mexican borders. The stated objective is, and I'm quoting here, restoration of constitutional governance through military intervention following catastrophic systemic failure. I stared at the maps. This reads like we're invading ourselves to, what, save ourselves from ourselves? Dr. Haas nodded slowly. The documents reference events that haven't occurred yet. A severe economic collapse in late 2027, followed by what they call the fragmentation, a period where federal authority breaks down and regional factions begin operating independently. According to these plans, by early 2029, the United States as we know it will have effectively ceased to function as a unified nation. The invasion is actually a reunification effort launched by what remains of the legitimate military command structure, probably operating from secure facilities or possibly from allied nations hosting our forces. This is insane, I said. You're talking about predicting the future, time travel, paradoxes.
None of this is scientifically possible. We thought so too, Admiral Chen said. Then we started noticing other anomalies. Small things at first. Weather data that matched predictions with impossible accuracy. Stock market fluctuations that someone seemed to anticipate days in advance. Equipment failures at precisely the times maintenance schedules would have prevented them, if those schedules had been followed. 3 weeks ago, we intercepted communications that referenced operations that hadn't been planned yet, using code names that were only created 5 days ago. She paused, letting that sink in. Someone or something has access to information from our future and is feeding it back to our present. Not just military intelligence, but detailed operational data. Frank Cordova pulled out a laptop and turned it toward me. We've identified 17 separate instances over the past 2 months where information from the future has intersected with current operations. Most of it is trivial, small details that wouldn't mean anything in isolation.
But when you aggregate the pattern, it's unmistakable. Someone is trying to change something. I looked at the screen, seeing a timeline marked with dozens of data points, each one representing an anomaly. The pattern was undeniable, clusters of events that seemed to build toward something, with the density increasing as it approached the present day. Why me? I asked. If this is real, if you actually have intelligence from the future, why bring in a contractor? You have entire agencies full of people with higher clearances and more specialized knowledge. Because everyone with higher clearance is potentially compromised, Colonel Marsh said. According to the invasion plans, the operation is coordinated by current members of the military and intelligence establishment. We don't know who we can trust within our own ranks. You're outside the direct chain of command. You have the technical skills we need, and, according to our background checks, you have a reputation for thinking creatively about problems. We need creative thinking right now. Dr. Haas opened his own laptop, displaying what looked like complex mathematical equations. The theoretical framework for temporal information transfer exists, he said. We've known for decades that quantum mechanics allows for certain types of causality violation under specific conditions. What we've never had is evidence that anyone successfully weaponized that knowledge. Until now, these documents, if genuine, represent a breakthrough in applied temporal mechanics. Someone in our future has found a way to send detailed information backward through time, and they're using it to alter the timeline. To what end? I asked. If they're sending back invasion plans, what are they trying to prevent or cause? That's what we need you to help us determine, Admiral Chen said. The plans themselves might be a warning, an attempt to prevent the very collapse they describe. Or they could be disinformation, designed to make us take actions that actually cause the catastrophe. We're dealing with potential paradoxes here. Every action we take based on this information could be exactly what leads to the future the information describes. I sat back, trying to process everything they'd dumped on me in the past 15 minutes. This was beyond anything I'd ever dealt with, beyond anything anyone had dealt with, if it was real. You still haven't proven to me that these documents are actually from the future, I said. For all I know, this could be an elaborate test, or a psychological operation to see how I respond to impossible scenarios. What evidence do you have that couldn't be faked by a sufficiently advanced present-day operation? Colonel Marsh and Admiral Chen exchanged looks. Then Marsh reached into her briefcase and pulled out a sealed plastic evidence bag. Inside was a newspaper. She slid it across the table to me. This was included with the invasion plans, she said. Page 17. I picked up the bag, examining the newspaper through the plastic. It was the Washington Post, dated March 14th, 2029. The front page headline read,
Federal Reserve announces emergency measures as dollar collapses. I flipped carefully to page 17, which contained local news and obituaries. There, circled in red marker, was a small article. Local contractor dies in accident. The article was only 3 paragraphs long, describing how David Mitchell, 38, of Arlington, Virginia, had been killed when his car was struck by a delivery truck that ran a red light at the intersection of Wilson Boulevard and North Courthouse Road. The accident occurred at approximately 3:47 p.m. on March 13, 2029. Services pending. I felt ice water pour through my veins. "That's tomorrow's date," I said quietly. 4 years from tomorrow. My hands holding the evidence bag were shaking now. This specific intersection, I drive through it every day on my way home from work. The other CIA agent, who hadn't spoken yet, leaned forward. His name tag read, Sullivan. "We've had a team monitoring that intersection for the past 72 hours, Mr. Mitchell, trying to determine if the accident could be prevented, or if attempting to prevent it might actually cause it. The delivery company mentioned in the article doesn't exist yet, but we've traced what will likely become that company to a current small business that matches the profile. We could intervene, warn you, change your route, but we don't know what effects that might have on the timeline. If you're supposed to die tomorrow, according to whoever sent this information, there might be a reason. Maybe your death is meant to be prevented, which is why they sent the warning.
Or maybe your death is necessary for some reason, and they're testing whether we'll interfere." Dr. Haas pulled the newspaper back toward his side of the table. "This is the essential problem with temporal mechanics," he said. "Causality becomes flexible. If we save Mr. Mitchell's life tomorrow, do we create a new timeline branch, or do we fulfill the existing timeline that already accounts for our intervention? Is there even a difference? The document suggests Mr. Mitchell dies tomorrow, but the very fact that we have the document means the future that sent it had access to this information. Perhaps in that future, Mr. Mitchell lived because we received the warning. Or perhaps he died despite the warning because we failed to act, or acted incorrectly." I stood up abruptly, needing to move, to process this. "You're telling me I'm supposed to die tomorrow? That you have a newspaper obituary from 4 years in the future, proving it, and you want me to help you figure out whether to save my own life?" The absurdity of it hit me, and I started laughing, a slightly hysterical edge to it. This is insane. All of this is completely insane. "Sit down, Mr. Mitchell," Colonel Marsh said, not unkindly. "I know this is overwhelming, but we need your head in the game. Your potential death tomorrow is just one small piece of a much larger puzzle. If these documents are genuine, we're looking at the collapse of the United States within the next few years, followed by a military action that will make our Civil War look like a minor skirmish. Millions of lives are at stake." I sat, forcing myself to breathe slowly. Okay, let's say I believe you, that this is all real. What exactly do you need me to do? "We need you to help us trace the source," Frank Cordova said. "These documents arrived through our secure systems, which means either someone in the future has access to our current security protocols, or someone in the present is receiving information and feeding it into the system. We need to know which, and we need to identify who. Your background in network security and your understanding of advanced mathematics make you uniquely qualified to analyze the data patterns. Additionally," Admiral Chen said, "we need you to help us understand the contents of the plans themselves. They're written in standard military format, but they reference technologies, tactics, and situations that don't exist yet. We need someone who can extrapolate from current trends
to determine whether the described future is plausible, probable, or being deliberately constructed. "And my death tomorrow?" I asked. "What about that?" "We've prepared a safe house," Colonel Marsh said. "If you agree to help us, you'll be placed in protective custody immediately. You won't go anywhere near that intersection tomorrow, or any day until we've resolved this situation. We're not going to let you die, Mr. Mitchell, not when we need your help. Unless you refuse to cooperate, in which case we'll have to consider whether allowing events to proceed naturally serves the greater good." "That's a threat," I said flatly. Admiral Chen shook her head. "It's a statement of priorities. We're trying to prevent a catastrophic future, Mr. Mitchell. One life, even your own, has to be weighed against millions. If we determine that your death tomorrow is a fixed point that can't be changed without worse consequences, we'll have to make hard choices. But we'd prefer not to. Help us, and we'll do everything in our power to keep you alive." I looked around the table at their serious faces. These weren't people prone to elaborate pranks or psychological games. They believed what they were telling me, which meant either it was true or we were all caught in something far stranger than a simple hoax. "Show me the rest," I said finally. "Everything you have. If I'm going to help you prevent the apocalypse and hopefully not die tomorrow, I need to see all of it." Colonel Marsh nodded and pulled out several more folders. Over the next 3 hours, they walked me through everything they'd discovered. The invasion plans were remarkably detailed, describing not just military movements, but the political and social conditions that would necessitate them. According to the documents, the catalyst would be a cascading economic failure beginning in late 2027, triggered by the simultaneous collapse of 3 major financial institutions. The documents named the institutions, all currently stable, and described the specific fraud and mismanagement that would lead to their failure.
Following the economic collapse, the plans described a period of increasing federal dysfunction. State governments would begin ignoring federal mandates, creating their own currencies, even forming regional compacts that functioned as separate nations. By 2028, the documents claimed, the U.S. would exist in name only, with at least 6 distinct regional governments operating independently. The military would fragment, along with everything else, with different commands declaring loyalty to different factions. What remained of the legitimate federal military, probably less than 30% of total forces, would spend months planning the reunification campaign, coordinating with allied nations to stage forces and supplies. The invasion itself would be a massive undertaking, requiring amphibious assaults on both coasts, airborne insertions into strategic points in the interior, and a careful political campaign to win over civilian populations and convince fragmented military units to stand down. The documents estimated 18 months of active combat before reunification could be achieved, with casualty projections that made my stomach turn. But woven through all of this were smaller details that seemed oddly specific. References to individuals by name, people who currently held minor positions, but would apparently become significant players in the fragmented future. Mentions of technologies that didn't exist yet, but were described in enough detail that our engineers might be able to develop them. Weather patterns for specific dates, years in the future, precise enough that meteorologists could potentially verify them as those dates approached. And scattered throughout, like breadcrumbs, were other warnings. Small notations that seemed intended to catch attention. A reference to the Philadelphia event in August 2026, with no explanation of what that event was. A mention of the Seattle outbreak in January 2028, again with no details. A cryptic note about the Yellowstone survey results that would be released in June 2027, stating only that they would be suppressed but should be made public. Someone in the future was trying to communicate more than just invasion plans.
Dr. Haas said, pointing to these anomalies. These references are deliberate, placed where they would be noticed. They're trying to give us information about other crisis points, other moments where intervention might be possible. Or, Frank Cordova countered, they're giving us disinformation designed to make us paranoid and reactive. If we start chasing phantom threats, investigating events that haven't happened, we could destabilize the very systems we're trying to protect. This is the problem with temporal information. We can't verify any of it until it's too late to matter. I studied the documents spread across the table, my analytical mind starting to engage with the puzzle, despite my emotional turmoil. There's a pattern here, I said, pointing to the timestamps on various documents. These weren't all created at the same time. Look at the file creation dates. They span a range of about 6 months in early 2029, but they all arrived in our system simultaneously 3 days ago. That suggests they were compiled over time, then sent back as a complete package. Which means, Admiral Chen said slowly, whoever sent them had months to prepare this data dump. This wasn't a hasty warning, it was carefully constructed. That changes things. It suggests intentionality, planning. This isn't someone desperately trying to change the past. It's someone methodically providing information for a specific purpose. I pulled my laptop from my bag, then remembered they'd taken it at security. Can I get a secured terminal? I need to start analyzing the digital forensics on these files.
I want to see the metadata, the encryption signatures, everything. Colonel Marsh nodded to the young lieutenant who had escorted me in. Set Mr. Mitchell up in Lab 3 with full access to the secure network. Dr. Haas, you'll assist him? Everyone else, we need to start planning our next moves. Mr. Mitchell confirms these documents are genuine, or at least that they're as anomalous as they appear. We'll need to brief the Joint Chiefs. The first followed the lieutenant and Dr. Haas out of the conference room. I glanced back at the newspaper in its evidence bag, still lying on the table. My own obituary, printed for years before my death. The surreal horror of it hadn't diminished. Anything, knowing I had less than 24 hours before the predicted accident made everything more immediate, more real. Lab 3 turned out to be a large room filled with computer equipment, some of it recognizable, much of it clearly custom-built for purposes I could only guess at. Dr. Haas settled into a chair beside me as I logged into the secure terminal using credentials the lieutenant provided. The invasion plan files were already queued up for analysis. I started with the basics, examining the file structure and metadata. What I found made no sense. Dr. Haas, I said after about 20 minutes, look at this. The creation dates on these files are consistent with 2029, but the file system they're stored in doesn't exist yet. This is a next-generation encrypted file system that's currently in development, not scheduled for implementation until at least 2027. Yet here it is, fully functional, with files that could only have been created within it. He leaned over to examine my screen. Could I? Be faked. Someone with access to the development specifications could theoretically create a prototype. Theoretically, yes, but look at the encryption keys. They're using a quantum key distribution system that requires hardware we don't have. The quantum states being used for key generation are too complex for current technology. This would require quantum computers at least 2 generations beyond what we currently have in even our most classified programs. Last, I added slowly, someone from the future sent back not just the files, but the specifications for the systems needed to create and read them. Dr. Haas pulled up another terminal and began typing rapidly. I've been consulting with the Pentagon on temporal mechanics for about 8 months, he said. It started as purely theoretical work, examining whether time travel might be possible and what forms it might take. The consensus was that sending matter backward in time violated too many conservation laws, required too much energy. But information, that was different. Information is just patterns, quantum states. In theory, if you could create a sufficiently stable quantum entanglement across time, you might be able to transmit data backward. He pulled up a document covered in equations. 3 months ago, I proposed an experiment to test this hypothesis. It was rejected as too expensive and too unlikely to produce results. But someone, somewhere, has apparently made it work. They've found a way to send detailed information backward through time, and they've chosen to send us these invasion plans. Why? I asked. That's the question that keeps bothering me. If you have the ability to send information through time, why send military invasion plans? Why not send lottery numbers, or stock prices, or warnings about specific disasters that could be prevented? So why this particular information? Dr. Haas was quiet for a moment, then said, "What if the invasion plans are the disaster they're trying to prevent? What if, by showing us what our future becomes, they're hoping we'll take actions to avoid it?" It's a classic grandfather paradox, but weaponized. They show us a terrible future and hope we change it, which would mean the future they sent the information from never happens, which creates a logical impossibility. I said, if we prevent the future they're warning us about, then they never exist to send the warning, which means we never prevent the future, which means they do exist to send the warning. It's a causal loop, unless there are multiple timelines, Dr. Haas said. Many worlds interpretation. Every decision creates a branch, a parallel reality. Maybe they're not trying to change their own past. They're trying to create a different timeline where the invasion never becomes necessary. Their world is already doomed, but ours doesn't have to be. My head was starting to hurt from the implications. Let's focus on what we can actually analyze, I said. The files, the data, the patterns. Leave the temporal philosophy for people with more degrees than me. Over the next several hours, Dr. Haas and I tore into the digital forensics of the invasion plan files. What we found was both fascinating and terrifying. The files had been accessed multiple times before arriving in the Pentagon system, with access logs showing user IDs that didn't exist in any current database. The IDs followed standard military format, but with designation codes that weren't currently in use. More tellingly, the access patterns showed coordination across multiple secure facilities, some of which we could identify as current military bases, others that we couldn't place at all. Either these are facilities that don't exist yet, I said, highlighting a series of access points, or they're so classified that even this level of security clearance doesn't reveal them. Dr. Haas frowned at the screen. Cross-reference those unknown facility codes with current military base expansion plans and black site development projects. Maybe we can identify what they'll become. I ran the query, watching as the system churned through classified databases I'd never had access to before. 3 of the unknown facilities matched planned expansion sites that hadn't been publicly announced yet. 2 others matched nothing in current records. Guess those 2, I said, pointing, are either completely new facilities that will be built in the next 4 years, or they're already built and hidden so deeply that they don't appear in any database we have access to. Or, Dr. Haas said grimly, they're facilities that will be built by one of the regional factions after the fragmentation. Remember, the invasion plans describe a military operating from outside traditional command structures. These unknown facilities might be strongholds built by breakaway forces. I saved the analysis and moved on to examining the actual content of the tactical plans. The level of detail was extraordinary, down to individual unit assignments and equipment loadouts. Whoever compiled this had access to personnel records, supply chain databases, and strategic planning documents at the highest levels of classification. As I read through the tactical sections, something caught my attention. A name I recognized. Dr. Haas. Look at this. In the tactical planning section, there's a reference to a scientific advisor assigned to the reunification command. Dr. Werner Haas, expertise in temporal mechanics and quantum communications. That's you. He leaned in, reading over my shoulder. His face went pale. That's impossible. I'm 63 years old. In 4 years, I'll be 67. Kate, the document describes this advisor as being in his late 50s, at the peak of his career. The age doesn't match. Unless, I said carefully, you're not the Dr. Werner Haas being referenced. Oh, what if it's someone else? A younger relative, maybe. Or what if the timeline has already changed enough that ages don't match anymore? He shook his head slowly. I have no children, no younger relatives who would share my name and career path. That's supposed to be me in the future. The timeline is already divergent from the one these documents describe, which supports the multiple timeline theory. We sat in silence for a moment, both grasping the implications. If the timelines were already diverging, if details were already different, what did that mean for the reliability of the invasion plans? Were they still valid predictions, or had our knowledge of them already altered the future enough to make them obsolete? A knock at the lab door interrupted my thoughts. Colonel Marsh entered, looking even more stressed than before. We have a situation, she said. Fort Meade just reported a similar data incursion. More documents from 2029, different content. These appear to be after-action reports from the invasion, describing what happened during the campaign, and they don't match the invasion plans we already have. What do you mean they don't match? I asked. The plans describe an operation beginning March 15, 2029, Marsh said. These after-action reports describe an operation that began June 3, 2029, nearly 3 months later. The strategic objectives are similar, but the tactical approach is completely different. It's as if we're receiving information from 2 different futures. Dr. Haas stood abruptly. We need to see those reports immediately. If we're receiving information from divergent timelines, the implications are, he paused, searching for words. There are no precedents. This is beyond theoretical. This is proof that timeline manipulation is not only possible, but actively occurring. We returned to the conference room, where the new documents had been spread out alongside the originals. I could see immediately that Marsh was right. The formats were identical, the security classifications matched, but the content described fundamentally different operations. In the original invasion plans, the opening assault focused on securing east and west coast ports to allow follow-on forces to land. In the after-action reports, the opening moves involved airborne seizures of inland strategic points, with coastal operations coming later. The force compositions were different. The timelines were different. Even the regional factions being opposed had different names and territories. It's like receiving 2 different movie scripts for the same basic plot, Frank Cordova said. The story is similar, but all the details are different. Which one is real? Both, I said. The answer suddenly obvious. They're both real, from different timelines. Someone isn't just sending us information from one future. They're sending us information from multiple futures, showing us different ways the collapse and reunification might play out. But why? Admiral Chen asked. What purpose does showing us multiple timelines serve? It's a decision tree, Doctor, Haas said excitedly, moving to a whiteboard and beginning to sketch. In quantum mechanics, we talk about superposition, multiple states existing simultaneously until observation collapses them into a single state. What if someone in the future has found a way to observe multiple timeline branches simultaneously? They're showing us different possible futures, different outcomes based on different decision points. The invasion plans and the after-action reports represent 2 different timeline branches, probably diverging from a decision point that hasn't happened yet. He tapped the whiteboard. If we can identify where the timelines diverge, we can see what decision or event creates the different outcomes. Then we can choose which timeline we want to pursue, or find a way to avoid both of them entirely. I started comparing the documents side by side, looking for the divergence point. It didn't take long to find. In the invasion plans, there was a reference to the Philadelphia event in August 2026 with a notation that it had been successfully contained. In the after-action reports, the same event was described as a catalyst that accelerated the fragmentation. Philadelphia event contained, I read aloud, minimal civilian casualties, federal authority maintained in the Northeast Corridor. That's from the invasion plans. In the after-action reports, the Philadelphia event is described differently. Federal containment failed. Mass civilian casualties. Pennsylvania secedes from the Union within weeks. That's the divergence point. Something happens in Philadelphia in August 2026, about a year from now. How that event is handled determines which timeline we follow. What happens in Philadelphia? Colonel Marsh asked. Neither document gives details, just references to an event that apparently has the potential to either be contained or spiral out of control. And they're assuming we know what it is, Sullivan added. These documents are written for people who lived through these events. They wouldn't need explanations. We're the ones missing context. I went back to my terminal and started searching through both sets of documents for any other references to Philadelphia or August 2026. There were surprisingly few. A mention of evacuation protocols that were either implemented successfully or failed catastrophically. A reference to a biological containment team that was either deployed in time or arrived too late. Biological containment, I said. This isn't a political event or an economic crisis. This is an outbreak of some kind. Something biological happening in Philadelphia in August next year. Dr. Haas pulled up a map of Philadelphia on one of the displays. What kind of biological threat? Natural disease? Bioterrorism? Lab accident? The documents don't specify, Admiral Chin said, reading over my shoulder. But they mention the CDC, FEMA, and the National Guard being involved. This is a major incident requiring federal disaster response. If it's contained successfully, we get one timeline. If it fails, we get another. So, we have about 16 months to prepare for an unknown biological event in Philadelphia, Frank Cordova said. 16 months to set up monitoring, prepare response teams, and try to prevent something we don't have any concrete information about. If we succeed, we potentially avoid the worst timeline. If we fail, we accelerate the collapse. I sat back, looking at all the documents spread across the table. We're being manipulated, I said quietly. Everyone turned to look at me. Think about it, I continued. Someone in the future, or multiple someones in multiple futures, is feeding us selected information. Not complete information, not clear warnings, but carefully chosen pieces designed to make us react in specific ways. They show us invasion plans to make us afraid of military collapse. They show us multiple timelines to make us believe we can choose our future. They give us just enough information about the Philadelphia event to make us focus our attention there. Then, what if that's exactly what they want? What if by trying to prevent the Philadelphia event, we actually cause it? I could see the doubt spreading across their faces. This is the essential problem with temporal information warfare, Dr. Haas said softly. Once you know someone is trying to manipulate the timeline, every action becomes suspect. Do we act on the information and risk fulfilling a self-fulfilling prophecy? Or do we ignore it and risk missing a chance to prevent catastrophe? We need more information, Colonel Marsh said firmly. We need to understand who is sending these documents and what their actual agenda is. Can we trace the source? Shook my head. The digital forensics showed the files appeared in our system as if they'd always been there. There's no intrusion point, no upload vector. It's like they materialized out of nothing, which is theoretically possible if they were transmitted via quantum entanglement, Dr. Haas said. The files wouldn't arrive through normal network channels. They'd appear directly in storage as the quantum states collapsed into classical information. Tracing that would require equipment we don't have. The discussion was interrupted by an urgent knock at the door. Another lieutenant entered, looking nervous. Colonel Marsh, ma'am, we have another situation. What now? Marsh asked, her patience clearly wearing thin. Sir, it's Mr. Mitchell. We've been monitoring the intersection where the accident is supposed to occur, the one from the newspaper obituary. There has been a development. My heart rate spiked. Kind of development. Kai, the delivery truck mentioned in the obituary. Sir, the one that doesn't exist yet, that we thought wouldn't exist for several more years. It was just spotted heading east on Wilson Boulevard. It exists now, and it's heading directly toward the intersection where Mr. Mitchell is supposed to die in. The lieutenant checked his watch. Approximately 2 hours and 15 minutes. I stood up so fast, my chair fell over backward. It's impossible. You said the company doesn't exist yet. Didn't this morning, the lieutenant confirmed. But we just ran the registration on the truck. The company was incorporated this afternoon, 3 hours ago. Someone created an entire business entity, registered vehicles, hired drivers, and put that specific truck on the road, all within the last few hours. They're forcing the timeline to converge, Dr. Haas said, his voice filled with awe and horror. Someone in the present has access to the future information, and they're actively working to make it come true. They're manufacturing the events the documents predict. Get Mr. Mitchell into protective custody immediately, Admiral Chen ordered. Lock down this facility. Someone is actively trying to kill him according to a predetermined timeline. This entire operation may be compromised. As guards moved toward me, I held up my hand. Wait, just wait a second, and think about this. If someone went to the trouble of creating a company and putting a truck on the road just to kill me at a specific time and place, what happens if we prevent it? Do they try again? Do they adapt and find another way? Or have we just revealed that we know about the timeline information by protecting me? We might be showing our hand. Frank Cordova said slowly. There's a mole, someone in the present receiving information from the future and working to fulfill it. Protecting Mr. Mitchell will alert them that we're aware of the documents and taking them seriously. I can't believe we're having this conversation, I said, hearing my voice rise. You're actually debating whether to let me die to protect operational security. No one is letting you die, Colonel Marsh said firmly. But we need to be smart about how we protect you. If we simply pull you off the street, we give away information. But if we're more subtle, if we create a scenario where the accident appears to happen but doesn't, we might be able to maintain our advantage while keeping you alive. How? I demanded. How do you fake my death at a specific intersection at a specific time when someone is actively trying to make it happen? Dr. Haas was typing frantically on his laptop. I have an idea, he said. It's risky, and it requires perfect timing, but it might work. We don't prevent the accident, let it happen exactly as described, but we make sure Mr. Mitchell isn't in the vehicle when it's hit. We need a volunteer, roughly Mr. Mitchell's build, willing to wear his clothes and drive his car through that intersection at exactly 3:47 p.m. The delivery truck hits the car. The volunteer is injured, but survives, hopefully, and from a distance, it looks like the prophesied accident occurred. Meanwhile, Mr. Mitchell is safely elsewhere. The newspaper said, I died, I pointed out. If your volunteer survives, won't that change things? The newspaper is from 4 years in the future, Dr. Haas countered. By definition, it hasn't been written yet. The information it contains is what will be reported in that future, but we don't know what actually happened in the present of that timeline, okay? If we stage an accident that looks fatal from initial reports, the newspaper might report your death even if you actually survived. Or, Sullivan interjected, the newspaper is reporting the truth from a timeline where Mr. Mitchell actually died, and by staging this deception, we're creating a branch point. A new timeline where he lives but the event still occurs. Either way, I said, we're gambling that we can outsmart whoever is trying to kill me while not revealing that we know we're being manipulated. The room fell silent as everyone considered the implications. Finally, Admiral Chen spoke. Do it. Set up the deception. Mr. Mitchell, you'll be moved to a safe location under heavy security. Dr. Haas, coordinate with our tactical team to stage the accident. make it convincing. And everyone in this room, remember that we may have a hostile actor with access to future information working against us. Trust no one outside this group. Over the next 2 hours, I watched as a plan came together with military precision. A volunteer was found, a junior officer who matched my general build and coloring. My car was rigged with additional safety equipment hidden from casual observation, airbags and roll cage and crash padding that would hopefully keep the volunteer alive. My clothes were duplicated as closely as possible. The intersection was put under covert surveillance with multiple camera angles. The delivery truck was tracked as it made its way along a circuitous route that would bring it to the intersection at exactly the right time. The driver had been identified, a recent hire with no significant background, probably just an unwitting pawn in whatever game was being played. I was moved to a safe house in Maryland, far from the intersection with Dr. Haas and a security detail. I watched the operation unfold on laptop screens, showing feeds from the surveillance cameras. At 3:45 p.m., my car, with the volunteer wearing my jacket and ball cap, pulled onto Wilson Boulevard and began driving toward the intersection. The volunteer did his best to mimic my driving style based on data they'd gathered from my vehicle's computer system. At 3:46, the delivery truck approached from the cross street, driving slightly too fast. At 3:47 and 17 seconds, according to the timestamp on the video, the truck ran the red light and slammed into the driver's side of my car. The impact was devastating. The car spun, hit a light pole, and crumpled. Even knowing it was staged, even knowing about the extra safety equipment, I felt sick watching it. The volunteer had to be seriously injured despite all the precautions. Emergency responders arrived within minutes because, of course, they'd been prepositioned nearby. The volunteer was extracted from the wreckage, clearly injured but alive and conscious. He was loaded into an ambulance and rushed away. The delivery truck driver sat on the curb, looking dazed, probably genuinely shocked by what had just happened. Initial reports came in quickly, picked up by police scanners and local news. Serious accident at Wilson and Courthouse. One vehicle badly damaged, driver's condition unknown, being transported to Virginia Hospital Center. Within an hour, local news websites had posted brief articles. Arlington accident leaves driver in critical condition. My name wasn't released pending notification of next of kin, which bought us time. I should feel relieved, I said, watching the feeds. But all I can think about is that someone, somewhere, wanted this to happen. Someone has access to future information and is actively working to make sure events occur exactly as predicted. And we still don't know who or why. Dr. Haas closed his laptop. The good news is that you're alive, and whoever orchestrated this believes they succeeded. The bad news is that we've confirmed we're dealing with an active threat, someone in the present who has future knowledge and is using it to shape events. This brings us back to the Philadelphia event, I said. If someone is working to fulfill the timeline, they'll also be preparing for Philadelphia. Whatever is supposed to happen there in 16 months, we can assume it's not an accident or a natural occurrence. It's planned. Need to get ahead of it. Dr. Haas agreed. We need to figure out what the Philadelphia event is and how to prevent it without letting anyone know we're trying to prevent it. The strategic complexity is extraordinary. My phone, which they'd returned to me at the safe house, buzzed with a message. It was from my sister, Jennifer, asking if I had seen the news about the accident near my apartment. She wanted to make sure I was okay. I stared at the message, realizing I couldn't respond. David Mitchell was supposed to be in critical condition in a hospital right now, possibly dying. I answered too quickly, too normally. It might raise questions. Someone might be watching communications, looking for signs that the timeline had been disrupted. I can't even tell my own sister I'm alive, I said. Not without potentially compromising the operation. This is what it means to fight a temporal information war, to become a ghost in your own life. Dr. Haas put a hand on my shoulder. I know this is difficult, but if we succeed, if we prevent the collapse these documents predict, you'll get your life back. You'll be able to explain everything to your sister. Till then, you're the most important asset we have. Someone tried to kill you, according to a script from the future. That makes you a nexus point, a place where timelines can be changed. Over the next several days, I remained in protective custody while my official status remained uncertain. The volunteer who'd taken my place in the crash has sustained serious but non-life-threatening injuries. Publicly, David Mitchell was reported in stable but critical condition, with hospital officials declining to release details. Privately, I continued working with Dr. Haas and the Pentagon team to analyze the documents from the future. We'd received 2 more data dumps, each containing different variations of future events. It became clear that we weren't dealing with a single timeline, but with multiple probability branches, different versions of how the next 4 years might unfold depending on critical decision points. The Philadelphia event remained a constant across all timelines, though its outcome varied. In some versions, it was contained. In others, it spiraled catastrophically. But it always happened in August 2026, and it always involved biological contamination of some kind. We started preparing quietly, working with CDC officials who were read into the program at the highest classification levels. Stockpiles of medical supplies began accumulating in strategic locations around Philadelphia. Specialized response teams trained for scenarios we couldn't fully explain to them. Surveillance of potential biological research facilities in the Philadelphia area intensified. But the more we prepared, the more I worried we were playing into someone's hands. If our mysterious opponent from the future had predicted we'd receive these warnings and prepare for Philadelphia, wasn't our preparation already accounted for in their plans? The paradoxes made my head hurt. 3 weeks after my supposed accident, I was sitting in the safe house reviewing the latest analysis when Frank Cordova arrived with news. "We've identified a potential source for the temporal transmissions," he said, setting up his laptop. "Or at least, we've identified where the quantum entanglement might be originating." Dr. Haas leaned forward eagerly. "Show me." Cordova pulled up a map showing a location in Nevada, near but not within the boundaries of any known military installation. According to our analysis of the quantum signatures in the transmitted data, they appear to originate from a specific geographic location. Coherence patterns suggest a fixed point in spacetime, which makes sense if someone has built a temporal transmission device and is using it repeatedly. It's nowhere near any facility that should have that kind of technology, Dr. Haas said, studying the coordinates. "There's nothing there according to official records." According to official records, Cordova agreed. But satellite imagery from the past 6 months shows new construction in that area. Heavily secured, lots of power infrastructure being installed, the kind of setup you need for advanced quantum computing. "We think someone has built a black site completely off the books and is using it to receive information from the future." "Who has that kind of resources?" I asked. "Building a secret facility, acquiring technology that shouldn't exist yet, operating completely outside official channels. That requires serious money and serious connections." Cordova's expression was grim. "That's the question that keeps us up at night. We're talking about a conspiracy that involves people with access to the highest levels of government and military, with resources to match. The list of potential suspects is long and terrifying. Could it be a foreign power?" I suggested. "China, Russia, someone who got ahead of us in temporal technology." "Unlikely," Dr. Haas said. "Dan, the quantum signatures are consistent with American technology, or at least technology based on American research. This is homegrown, which means," I said slowly, "that somewhere in our own government or military, it's a faction that has decided they know better than everyone else how the future should unfold. So they're receiving information from multiple timelines and choosing which one to make real. And they decided that timeline should include killing me," Cordova added. "God, which suggests you're important somehow, that you have a role to play that they wanted to prevent." "God, killing me was just a test, okay? A way to see if they could make a specific predicted event happen, okay? If they could successfully orchestrate my death, according to the newspaper from the future, it would confirm they could control timeline convergence. We failed their test by keeping you alive, Dr. Haas said. Which means they now know we have the documents and are working to change the predicted future. The game has escalated. We need to move on that Nevada facility, Cordova said. Rated, shut down whatever operation they're running and seize any temporal technology before they can use it again. Colonel Marsh won't authorize it, Dr. Haas predicted. We don't know who we can trust. We call in military forces to raid the facility. We might be alerting the very people who built it. We need to see inside that facility, I said. Right. But we need to do it quietly, without tipping off whoever is running it. Right. What if we didn't raid it? What if we just watched it, monitored communications, identified who's coming and going? We might be able to figure out who's behind this without revealing that we know it exists. Over the next week, a covert surveillance operation was set up around the Nevada facility. Long-range cameras, signal intercepts, satellite imagery, all focused on a cluster of buildings that officially didn't exist. What we discovered was both enlightening and deeply disturbing. The facility was receiving regular visits from people we could identify through facial recognition. Military officers, government officials, private sector leaders. Many of them were names that appeared in the future documents, people who would apparently play significant roles in either preventing or enabling the collapse of the United States. They're building a conspiracy, Admiral Chen said during a briefing where we reviewed the surveillance findings, not just receiving information from the future, but actively coordinating with each other to shape events. This is bigger than we thought. So one name that appeared frequently at the facility caught my attention, Dr. Sarah Chen, a physicist who worked for a private defense contractor. She wasn't famous, wasn't high profile, but she'd published several papers on quantum entanglement and temporal mechanics. And she was Admiral Chen's daughter. The Admiral's face went white when we identified her in the surveillance footage. That's not possible, she said quietly. Sarah wouldn't be involved in something like this. She's a scientist, not a conspirator. With respect, ma'am, Frank Cordova said gently, we need to consider the possibility that your daughter is either being used or is a willing participant. Her expertise in temporal mechanics makes her exactly the kind of person this conspiracy would need. I need to talk to her, Admiral Chen said. Immediately, privately. That could compromise the investigation. Colonel Marsh objected. If you contact her and she reports it to her co-conspirators, we lose our advantage. She's my daughter, Chen said sharply. I'll know if she's lying to me. And if she's somehow been caught up in this unwittingly, I may be able to turn her, get her to work with us instead of against us. After heated debate, it was decided that Admiral Chen would make contact with her daughter, but under controlled circumstances and with full surveillance. The meeting was set up to look casual, a mother and daughter having lunch at a restaurant in Arlington. We had cameras, microphones, and a tactical team positioned nearby. I watched the meeting unfold on monitors from a van parked 2 blocks away. Admiral Chen and Dr. Sarah Chen sat across from each other at a quiet corner table, making small talk about family matters. Then the Admiral carefully steered the conversation toward her daughter's work. How's the research going? Admiral Chen asked, still working on that quantum project. Sarah's expression became guarded. It's going well. We've made some interesting breakthroughs, actually. It's nothing I can really discuss though. If you know how it is with proprietary research. The Admiral leaned forward slightly. Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Have you been working on temporal mechanics? Okay. On sending or receiving information through time? The younger woman's face went through a series of emotions. Surprise, fear, calculation. After a long moment, she said quietly, how did you find out? So it's true, Chen said, and I could hear the pain in her voice. You've been part of this, Sarah. Do you understand what you've been involved in? What they're trying to do? I understand better than you think, Doctor. Chen replied, Mom, the future is real. We've seen it. We have solid proof of what's coming. The collapse, the fragmentation, millions of people suffering because our government fails. We're not trying to cause that. We're trying to prevent it. By orchestrating events, by trying to control the timeline, by killing people who don't fit into your vision of how things should unfold. Sarah's eyes widened. What are you talking about? We haven't killed anyone. Admiral Chen pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. A civilian contractor named David Mitchell was supposed to die in a car accident 3 weeks ago, according to a newspaper from your future. Someone went to considerable effort to make that accident happen. Okay? Are you saying your group had nothing to do with that? I saw Dr. Chen open the folder, saw her face pale as she looked at the newspaper obituary and the accident reports. This isn't. We didn't, she stammered. Mom, I swear to you, our project isn't about killing people or orchestrating accidents. We're just receiving information and analyzing it, trying to understand what's coming so we can prepare. Then, who created the delivery company? I asked through Admiral Chen's concealed earpiece. The Admiral repeated the question. Who created Global Express Delivery and put that specific truck on the road at that specific time? I don't know, Sarah said, and her confusion seemed genuine. Mom, I'm just a physicist. I work on the technical side, the quantum entanglement, the data reception. I don't know anything about delivery companies or accidents. Someone is using your research for purposes you don't understand, Admiral Chen said. Sarah, I need you to tell me everything about this project. Who's running it? Where is the information coming from? And what are they really trying to accomplish? Dr. Chen looked around the restaurant nervously. Can't talk about this here. If they find out I've said anything, she lowered her voice. Mom, these people don't make idle threats. Seen what happens to team members who ask too many questions. You're in danger, Admiral Chen said. Let us protect you. Come with me right now, and we'll get you somewhere safe. Sarah shook her head. If I disappear, they'll know you got to me. They'll accelerate their plans, whatever those plans are. I need to stay in position, but I can feed you information. You mole inside their operation? Before the Admiral could respond, Dr. Chen's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her face went even paler. Have to go. Emergency call back to the facility. Mom, she reached across the table and grabbed her mother's hand. Be careful. Please. Trust no one. The entire system is more compromised than you know. She stood up and walked quickly out of the restaurant. He followed her via traffic cameras as she got into her car and drove directly back to the Nevada facility. Colonel Marsh asked over the communication link, Is she trustworthy or not? I think she's scared, Admiral Chen said slowly. And I think she's telling the truth about not knowing the full scope of what her research is being used for. But she knows more than she's telling us. We need to get her out of there. Before we could plan our next move, alarms started going off in the van. The surveillance equipment monitoring the Nevada facility showed a sudden spike in activity. What's happening? I asked the technician manning the equipment. Major power surge at the facility, he reported. Whatever quantum systems they have in there just went active. They're receiving or transmitting data, and it's a massive dump. It's much larger than previous transmissions. Get eyes on the facility, Cordova ordered. All cameras, maximum zoom. Need to see what's happening. The satellite feed showed the facility's main building with lights blazing. Vehicles were arriving rapidly, people running inside. Then, suddenly, everything went dark. The power cut out completely. Emergency systems, the technician said. They've gone to internal power only. They're trying to isolate whatever they're doing from the outside grid. Can we intercept the transmission? Dr. Haas asked. If they're receiving future data, can we capture it before they do? The technician shook his head. Quantum entanglement doesn't work that way. The data appears directly at the reception point. There's no signal to intercept in the traditional sense. We need to physically access their equipment to see what they're receiving. Okay? Then we go in, Cordova said decisively. Okay? Now, while they're distracted with whatever this transmission is, this full tactical team secure the facility, seized the equipment and all personnel. The authorization came through quickly. Within an hour, we had a team assembled and moving toward the Nevada facility. I insisted on going along, despite objections about my safety. If we were about to seize technology from the future and confront a conspiracy that had already tried to kill me once, I wanted to be there. The approach was quiet, using night vision and stealth to get close to the facility perimeter. But as soon as the team breached the fence, all hell broke loose. The facility had been expecting us. Automated defenses activated, lights blazed, and security forces poured out of the buildings. These weren't rent-a-cops. They were professional soldiers, well-armed and well-trained. The firefight was intense but brief. Our team had superior numbers and the element of surprise, even though the facility had known we were coming. Within 20 minutes, the compound was secured, though not without casualties on both sides. Inside the main building, we found it. A massive room filled with quantum computing equipment, far beyond anything that should exist in current technology. In the center was what could only be described as a temporal receiver, a complex array of quantum processors surrounding what looked like a three-dimensional display showing multiple streams of data. Dr. Haas rushed to the equipment, his eyes wide with scientific wonder and horror. "This is incredible," he breathed. "They've actually done it. They've created a stable quantum entanglement across time, multiple timelines, all accessible simultaneously. They can see different versions of the future and choose which data to act on." "Where are the people?" Colonel Marsh demanded. "Where's the staff?" The facility appeared to be deserted, except for the security forces, all of whom had been detained. Cordova's team swept through every room, finding evidence of hasty evacuation. "They knew we were coming," Cordova said grimly. They cleared out before we arrived, taking key personnel and probably destroying evidence. "But they left this," Admiral Chen called out from a side office. I joined her to find a video display showing a message clearly meant for us. The video showed a conference room with several people seated around a table, their faces digitally obscured. But I recognized one figure by her posture and gestures, Dr. Sarah Chen. A digitally altered voice spoke from the video. "If you're watching this, you've successfully raided our facility. Congratulations. You've seized equipment you don't fully understand and closed down an operation you don't comprehend. Let us save you some time with explanations. We are the Temporal Preservation Initiative, a group dedicated to preventing the catastrophic future your own documents have shown you. Unlike you, we're not passively receiving information and debating what to do with it. We're actively working to reshape the timeline to ensure the United States survives the coming crisis. The invasion plans you received were sent by us from a future we're trying to prevent. Multiple versions from multiple timelines, showing you different possibilities. We need you to understand that the future is not fixed. The decisions made now will determine which timeline becomes real. The Philadelphia event will happen. It's already inevitable, given actions already taken, forces already in motion. Whether it destroys America or simply tests, it depends on how it's handled. We've been preparing, positioning resources and people to ensure the containment succeeds. Your interference may have jeopardized that." A figure I believed to be Dr. Sarah Chen leaned forward. "Mom, if you're watching this, I'm sorry. I know you feel betrayed, but please understand, we're trying to save millions of lives. The research Dad did before he died, his work on quantum mechanics and timeline preservation, it's all come to fruition. This is what he would have wanted." I saw Admiral Chen flinch at the mention of her late husband. The video continued. "You've seized our equipment, but we have backups, other facilities you haven't found. You've temporarily disrupted our operations, but we'll continue our work. The future will thank us for what we're doing, even if the present condemns us. There's one more thing you should know. David Mitchell isn't dead, obviously. You staged his accident quite cleverly. But the fact that he's alive has already created a timeline divergence. In the original future, the one we're trying to prevent, he was genuinely dead. His survival has introduced a new variable, one we didn't account for. Mr. Mitchell, if you're listening, you're now a walking paradox. Your existence is proof that the timeline can be changed. Use that knowledge wisely. The video ended, leaving us all staring at the blank screen. They knew we were coming, Colonel Marsh said. They knew we'd raid the facility, knew we'd find this message. This was all planned. They wanted us to seize this equipment, Dr. Haas said, moving back to examine the temporal receiver. Why? What advantage does that give them? Maybe they want us to see what they've seen, Admiral Chen suggested. They claim they're trying to save the future. What if they believe that showing us the full scope of what's coming will convince us to work with them instead of against them? Or, I said, they've already seen a timeline where we raid this facility, where we seize this equipment, and they know how it plays out. Carrie, they're not trying to stop us because they know they don't need to. We're already doing exactly what they want. The paradoxes were making my head spin again. Keith, the Temporal Preservation Initiative could see multiple timelines. Did they already know every move we'd make? Were we operating with free will, or were we just following a script they'd already read? Dr. Haas began interfacing his laptop with the temporal receiver, trying to access its data. What he found made everyone in the room fall silent. They've left us access, he said, complete access to their timeline database. Every version of the future they've received, hundreds of different timelines spanning the next decade. It's all here. Show me Philadelphia, I said. Tell me what happens in August 2026. Dr. Haas pulled up a timeline labeled Primary Branch Phi 7 and began playing through the data. What unfolded was horrifying. August 15th, 2026, a research facility in Philadelphia, one conducting classified biological weapons research, suffered a catastrophic containment failure. Genetically modified pathogen, designed to be highly contagious but theoretically controllable, was released into the surrounding neighborhood. The pathogen spread rapidly, faster than any natural disease. Within 72 hours, thousands were infected. Within a week, tens of thousands. The symptoms were brutal: hemorrhagic fever, organ failure, and in a significant percentage of cases, extreme neurological effects that made victims violent and aggressive before they died. The federal response in this timeline was slow and confused. Bureaucratic delays, lack of coordination between agencies, and public panic that spread faster than the disease itself. By the time effective quarantine measures were implemented, the pathogen had spread to 3 states. The death toll reached 6 figures. More importantly, the public's faith in federal institutions collapsed completely. When it was revealed that the pathogen had been created in a government-funded research program, that its release was due to negligence and corner cutting to meet budget constraints, the outrage was unprecedented. State governments began refusing federal directives, claiming they could protect their citizens better than Washington could. That's the catalyst, Admiral Chen said softly, staring at the simulation. That's what breaks America. Not an economic collapse or a foreign invasion, but our own government creating a plague and then failing to contain it. I watched as the timeline continued, showing the cascading failures over the next 2 years. State secessions, regional compacts forming, the military fragmenting, as soldiers chose loyalty to their home states over federal command. By 2029, the United States existed only as a legal fiction. The reality was 6 or 7 regional governments, some democratic, some authoritarian, all claiming to represent the true American government. T's in the invasion plans, the reunification campaign, all of it stemmed from this one event in Philadelphia. Show me a different timeline, I said. One where Philadelphia is handled better. Dr. Haas pulled up Branch Fight 23. In this version, the same containment failure occurred, but the response was immediate and overwhelming. Federal resources mobilized within hours. The CDC, FEMA, the National Guard, all coordinated perfectly. The infected area was isolated quickly, treated aggressively, and the pathogen was contained within Philadelphia's city limits. The death toll was still tragic, several thousand people, but it was measured in thousands instead of hundreds of thousands. More importantly, the federal response was seen as effective, competent. People died, but the government saved far more than it failed. Public trust was damaged, but not destroyed. The investigations that followed led to reforms, accountability, and ultimately a strengthening of oversight for biological research. In this timeline, America survived. Battered, traumatized, but intact. There was no fragmentation, no regional governments, no invasion. The next few years saw challenges, certainly, but nothing that threatened the nation's existence. It's what they're trying to achieve, Colonel Marsh said. The Kennel Preservation Initiative saw both timelines and decided they needed to ensure the second one happens instead of the first. Can you blame them for that? We can, if their methods involve killing people and manipulating events without oversight or accountability. Admiral Chin countered. Good intentions don't justify operating outside the law. Okay. Plus, I added, studying the timelines, how do we know they're actually trying to achieve the good timeline? If they've decided the fragmentation is preferable? What if they're working to ensure Philadelphia goes wrong, not right? Everyone turned to look at me. Think about it, I continued. They have access to all these timelines. They claim they're trying to prevent the bad future, but the only evidence we have of that is their word. What if the Temporal Preservation Initiative is actually working to cause the collapse? What if they're true believers in some ideology that sees a fractured America as preferable to a united one? What would their actions look like any different than what we've seen? The room fell silent as everyone considered the possibility. They tried to kill you, Frank Cordova said slowly. Or at least, someone using future information tried to orchestrate your death. The TPI wanted to prevent the bad timeline. Why would they need you dead? Unless my survival somehow contributes to the bad timeline, I said. Maybe in the version where I die, Philadelphia is handled better. Maybe I'm somehow connected to the research facility, or to the containment failure, and removing me from the timeline prevents it. That's completely speculative, Dr. Haas objected. We don't have any evidence that Mr. Mitchell is connected to Philadelphia or biological research. Let's pull up my file, I said quietly. A complete background, including the parts I don't usually talk about. Admiral Chin accessed a classified personnel database and pulled up my records. What she found made her face go pale. Dr. Haas leaned over to read the screen, then looked at me with new understanding. You worked at that facility, he said. Before you became a defense contractor, you did a 2-year stint as an IT consultant for the Advanced Biological Research Institute in Philadelphia. It's the same facility that's going to suffer the containment failure. I left that job 6 years ago, I said. Quit, because I couldn't stomach the security culture there. Too much focus on cutting corners, not enough on safety protocols. I filed several reports about cybersecurity vulnerabilities that could compromise physical containment systems. All of them were ignored because fixing them would have cost money. Colonel Marsh said, you know what's going to cause the containment failure. You've already identified the vulnerability that will be exploited. You tried to warn them 6 years ago, and they ignored you. Someone from the future knows that, I said, feeling the pieces fall into place. They know that I'm the one person who might be able to prevent the Philadelphia event. I know the facilities, systems. I know the vulnerabilities. And if I'm alive in August 2026, I might be the person the government calls when they're trying to figure out how to contain the outbreak. That's why they wanted you dead, Admiral Chen said. Not because your death helps their plan, but because your survival threatens it. The TPI isn't trying to prevent the bad timeline. They're trying to ensure it. They want America to fragment, and they've been using future information to make sure it happens. We need to shut them down, Colonel Marsh said. Completely. Find their other facilities. Arrest everyone involved. Seize all their equipment. We can't let them continue manipulating the timeline. But if we act overtly, Cordova warned, we might push events in directions we can't predict. This is temporal warfare. Every action has consequences that ripple through time. We need to be smarter than they are. I have an idea, Dr. Haas said slowly. It's risky, possibly paradoxical, but it might work. We use their own equipment against them. We've seized this temporal receiver, which means we have access to all the timelines they've been studying. What if we send information backward ourselves? Create a counter message that undermines their efforts. You're talking about sending data back through time, Admiral Chen said, communicating with our own past. The paradoxes alone could be catastrophic. Dr. Haas shook his head. The paradoxes are already in play. The TPI has been sending information backward for months, maybe years. The timeline is already fluid, already being actively manipulated. We need to add our own manipulation to counteract theirs. What would we send? The timeline is already fluid, already being actively manipulated. We need to add our own manipulation to counteract theirs. What would we send? I asked. What information could we transmit to our past selves that would help prevent the Philadelphia event and stop the TPI? Dr. Haas began typing on his laptop, interfacing with the temporal receiver. We send the truth. Complete documentation of the TPI's activities, proof that they're working to cause the collapse, not prevent it. We send it back to ourselves 6 months ago, before they tried to kill you, Mr. Mitchell. We give our past selves a head start on stopping them. And if that creates a paradox, Cordova asked. If we successfully warn our past selves and prevent everything that's led to this moment, including our discovery of this facility, then we'll have succeeded. Dr. Haas said simply, we'll have changed the timeline enough that this version of events, where we're standing in this facility having this conversation, will never have happened. We'll cease to exist in any meaningful sense, but a better timeline will exist instead. Isn't that the goal? I looked around at the assembled group. All of them were willing to potentially erase themselves from existence to save the future. It was simultaneously the most selfless and most terrifying thing I'd ever witnessed. Do it, Colonel Marsh said firmly. Send a message. Whatever happens, we can't let the TPI succeed in fragmenting America. It's the timeline where we unite is better than the timeline where we collapse, even if it costs us our existence in this branch. Dr. Haas worked for the next hour, compiling data and preparing the transmission. He included everything we'd learned, the TPI's true goals, the Philadelphia event details, the vulnerabilities at the research facility, and instructions for our past selves on how to prevent both the containment failure and the conspiracy. Finally, he turned to face us. This is it. Once I activate this transmission, we won't know if it worked. We won't know if our past selves receive it or act on it. We might simply wink out of existence as this timeline collapses, or we might continue on in a branch timeline that leads nowhere. Are we certain this is the right choice? Yes, Admiral Chen said without hesitation. Send it. Dr. Haas pressed the final key, and the temporal receiver hummed with power. Quantum states aligned, entanglements formed across time, and the data package shot backward through the fourth dimension. For a moment, nothing happened. Then reality began to feel strange, fluid, like the world was losing cohesion. I looked at my hands and saw them beginning to fade, becoming translucent. Around me, the others were experiencing the same thing. We're timeline ghosts, Dr. Haas said, his voice sounding distant. The past has changed, which means this present never existed. We're the echoes of a timeline that's being erased. It's the last thing I saw before everything dissolved was Colonel Marsh smiling. We did it, she said. We saved them. Then I was standing in my apartment 6 months earlier, no longer fading, solid and real again. But something was different. On my desk was a folder I didn't remember seeing before, marked Urgent Timeline Data. I opened it and began reading. Inside was everything we had just compiled in that Nevada facility that would never be built now. Information about the TPI warnings about Philadelphia, detailed instructions on how to prevent both catastrophes. At the bottom was a note in my own handwriting, though I had no memory of writing it. You have 6 months. Use them wisely. The Philadelphia event happens August 15th, 2026. The research facility is compromised. You know the vulnerabilities. Fix them. As for the TPI, they're operating but haven't moved openly yet. Attached is a list of members. Approach Admiral Chen at the Pentagon. She believes you because her daughter is on the list. Stop them before they can establish their network. Hand David. Be careful at the intersection of Wilson and Courthouse on March 13th. A delivery truck is going to run the red light at 3:47 p.m. Don't be there. Good luck. You've already saved the future once. Do it again. I picked up my phone and pulled up Admiral Chen's contact information from my security clearance files. This was going to be the strangest phone call of my life. Trying to convince a high-ranking military official that her daughter was part of a temporal conspiracy that hadn't fully formed yet. But I had the evidence, the timeline data, and 6 months to make sure none of the terrible futures we'd seen would come to pass. As I dialed, I thought about my other self, the one who had lived through discovering the TPI facility, who had made the choice to erase his own timeline to give me this chance. I wouldn't waste it. The phone rang. Admiral Chen answered. This is Admiral Chen. Ma'am, my name is David Mitchell. I'm a civilian contractor with security clearance. I need to brief you on a matter of extreme national security involving temporal mechanics. Your daughter, Dr. Sarah Chen, and a catastrophic event scheduled to occur in Philadelphia 16 months from now. I know how this sounds, but I have documentation you need to see immediately. There was a long pause. Then she said, Mr. Mitchell, you should know that I received a very strange folder on my desk this morning. It contained information about temporal transmissions and a conspiracy involving my daughter. The folder suggested you would be calling. I think we need to meet. How soon can you get to the Pentagon? I smiled. The message had worked. Our past selves, or rather, these timeline versions of ourselves, had received the warnings. I can be there in an hour, I said. Good. I'll assemble a small team. People I trust. We have 16 months to prevent a catastrophe and stop a conspiracy. Mr. Mitchell, let's not waste any time. I hung up and looked at the folder again. Inside was one more item I hadn't noticed before. A newspaper from March 14th, 2029. The date my other self had been supposed to die. The headline read, Philadelphia Containment, Success, Federal Response, Praised. There was no obituary for David Mitchell. I had lived. We had changed the timeline. The bad future had been prevented. But as I gathered my materials to head to the Pentagon, I couldn't shake a nagging feeling. We had successfully changed the timeline. If the TPI had been stopped before they could cause harm, why had I needed to receive the warning at all? Who had sent the original message if the timeline where it was sent no longer existed? The paradoxes of temporal mechanics continued to twist my thoughts as I drove toward the Pentagon. Maybe some questions weren't meant to be answered. Maybe it was enough to know that somewhere in some version of reality, people had been willing to sacrifice their own existence to save others. As I passed through the intersection of Wilson and Courthouse, I checked the time. 3:47 p.m. A delivery truck sat at the red light on the cross street, waiting patiently. When the light turned green, it proceeded normally through the intersection. No accident, no catastrophe. Just a regular truck making regular deliveries in a timeline where David Mitchell would live to help prevent a plague and stop a conspiracy. I continued toward the Pentagon and toward a future that was no longer written in stone. Whatever came next, we would face it with the knowledge that timelines could be changed, that terrible futures could be prevented, and that sometimes the greatest act of heroism was sacrificing your own existence to save others. The invasion plans from 2029 would never come to pass. not because they were fake, but because we had made them obsolete. The future had been rewritten, and this time we would make sure it was written right.